Hello, everybody, and welcome to What You Need to Know. I am Sybil Wilkes. It is Monday. It is Labor Day. Many of us have labored today. Hopefully, folks had a good day and able to enjoy the day off. Uh, I am very, very happy and very proud to reintroduce and to bring back two gentlemen that I'm just crazy about, both by the name of Williams, go by the name Damon Williams, by the way. Damon G. Williams for great and Damon A. Williams. Good evening, gentlemen. How are you?
I'm doing really well. I'm grateful to be back on. So, but how are you?
I'm really glad to have you back and grateful that you have the time because I know you're such a busy fellow, almost as busy as your dad. How you doing, Damon G?
I'm doing good. I'm almost back in the saddle again. I've been moving around a little bit. Smaller shows and smaller checks, but still good laughs.
Big laughs, small checks.
I'm not ready to be around a whole bunch of people yet. Anyway, I ain't playing
Yeah.
the Rona roulette just yet.
Yeah, I can imagine. I'm not ready yet either. So good on you for going out there and trying to check the temperature and what have you. Because I'm definitely. What about you, Damon A? Are you out and about? Are you
I, I
still quarantined in?
I try to be as still as I can. This summer with all that's been going on, definitely brought us back out in the world a little bit. So, doing some trainings here and there. But for the most part, I try to stay in the house as much as possible.
Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah.
It's tough. We are here today. I wanted to bring people up to speed as to because we tried to get you, but as you said, you've had a busy summer and them streets is hot,
Yeah.
as they say. But for real, we're going to talk about the wonderful surprise, and for many of us, not a surprise, but the wonderful gift of seeing your handsome face in the covers of the September issue of Vanity Fair magazine, the one with the beautiful portrait of Breonna Taylor on the cover. And so we will talk about that, but and talk about all the things that you're doing, and once again bringing about awareness to how things are on the streets of Chicago, if not the rest of this country and the world. As I said, this is Labor Day, and are you guys from labor families, union families?
I don't think we have any labor folks directly in our family, but like
Mm,
I feel that like my work and my political life is in the
right.
lineage of labor struggles. So I really respect the history.
Yeah, and I do too. I think that you are definitely in that line, and I didn't know if it came down from from generations and generations. I have my mom was a Chicago public school teacher, so of course she was in
Mm,
that union. My dad was a Chicago fireman, but when my dad was a fireman, they didn't have a union in Chicago.
Right.
Yeah, and that's how long ago it was. And so he passed before the Chicago firemen got a union, and you can imagine how things were then as a black man with the Chicago Fire Department and not having any union support. And
Yeah.
so, but my mom was a longtime union person, and I remember going to those meetings and things like that with the Chicago Teachers Union and what have you. But in the newsletter, and I don't know if you guys got a chance to see this, but we did talk about the role that Black people have played in the unions, and especially going back, the first labor union that was created by the abolitionist Frederick Douglass,
mm,
according to a lot of records, and it was the American League of Colored Laborers. And this was the first national black, that was followed by the first national black labor union in 1869. And then in Chicago, of course, knowing about the Pullman factory
mhm.
and the Pullman transportation and the trains, we had access to Pullman Village. And that goes back into the late 1890s into the 1900s, and finally how A. Philip Randolph was the one to start the Brotherhood of the sleeping car porters. And my uncle was one of those porters on the trains, and so it's just really interesting
Yeah.
to see about it.
And for the people who might not know or be familiar with it, because I sort of am, that Pullman situation, which they're really trying to renovate that now. They're trying
Yeah,
to surge in that community. It was the pipeline back to the south for
yeah,
news back and forth. The porters were really like a black telegram service. They brought the Chicago Defender copies down
Yep.
south, and that's how paper got circulated. So it's a rich history there. Now, my mother was union. She worked for Illinois Bell,
Yeah.
AT&T for life, and so yeah, that answers that question as well.
Yeah. And so Damon, I haven't been over in that area for quite some time, but as you say, they have tried to revive it and to bring like a visitor center and really make it a tourism area in Pullman Village on the south side of Chicago. Have you guys been over there lately?
No, but I just saw an interview or a story on the news just today mentioning that the fact that they're about to do something with the structures that are there, the
Hmm.
historic buildings and such. So I'm looking forward to it. It's really a deep history part of our city, and it's right here on the south side. So it's
Yeah.
easy.
But you are absolutely right when you talk about the role that the porters played, and they really were our method of communication in a lot of respects, because not only when they had the time, if they had the time, they would read the Defender and other things and share with us the news as they came back and forth before people could even get a hold of those papers sometimes. So it's really amazing the role that they played in our lives, not only as working men, but as men who were communicators too.
Yeah, and we have to admit that one, I got the Frederick Douglass hanging behind
Y-
me, but the struggle for Black people and for like liberation in life always has been tied up to the struggle around economic justice and labor relations. So Martin Luther King was assassinated in Memphis in a
Yep,
labor struggle,
yep,
and I could go down the list line of the history of how the notion of civil rights, the notion of what you could even call Black power or Black liberation,
yeah,
even the beginnings of like the connection between police brutality and the fights that we've been waging against that struggle has been interconnected with labor unions. So we need to really uplift the work that's happening now. There's
yeah.
actually on a national level the development
Maybe
of strike language that's happening in
Mhm.
the name for Black lives in correlation with the movement for Black lives. We've been definitely in close relationship here in Chicago with CTU, which you uplifted already,
Yeah.
and then also the fight for a higher minimum wage of $15, not only in the state but nationally,
Right.
has been a current labor fight that's happening. So everybody who's enjoying this holiday should know that for the last 100 years, people have been stepping up for us to have weekends, for us to have protections.
To have 40-hour weeks,
Yeah,
remember, and you talk
yeah,
about the conditions in which our people worked. Obviously, our people
hmm
before there was freedom, but also just the conditions in which they worked, the hours, getting weekends off. What was a vacation? And the money, setting a level for which people should be paid. And it's just, and as you mentioned, Dr. King's final appearance, public appearance, was in Memphis, where he was there with the sanitation workers. And you saw that sign of those men who had been striking for 2 months before Dr. King got there and made that appearance. And I've been to the mountaintop speech on April 3rd of 1968. We do have a long history, and it's not just about the men, also domestic workers who were led by, it was a Dorothy Lee, who Dorothy Lee Bolden was the founder of the National Domestic Workers Union as well, and set a standard for women who worked in homes to be paid. As opposed to everything being under the table and getting Social Security and all of those things that came about as a result of her work.
and not only did they cut the hours down to 40-hour work weeks, that's how you get them two 15-minute breaks too.
Right. For real, David. Yes.
15-minute breaks, that saved a lot of jobs. A lot of people
Okay.
was just snap out on the boss, and they
Yeah.
was like, you know what, I'm gonna take my break. Both fade in the face.
Yep. We could have used some of those in radio, Damon. I dare say. Right this very moment, but that's another story. Um, are you involved, Damon A. and Damon G. in watching what's going on with the campaign at this point? Are you involved or are you interested?
I'm interested in how Black people are responding to the campaign and
Mm-hmm.
trying to like gauge the political consciousness of our people.
Mm-hmm.
I am not interested in the candidates themselves,
Fair.
and I'm highly critical of all that we have available. And I'm much more critical of the systemic processes themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But what I understand that's really important before I get into all of my big words is that like fascism is on the rise
Mm-hmm.
with our current administration. And so like before we get into any of the depths, just like how dangerous that is for marginalized, for Black people, for people of color across the world. So, we definitely have a real danger. It's a dangerous time,
It
to say the
is.
least. Yeah.
Have
Yeah.
you? I'm sorry, Damon. Go ahead.
Well, I've been kind of outspoken on the fact that we've had a lot of people come out and say that the Democrats and we as Black people should hold them accountable and have them have a specific agenda for us as a people before we vote in this next election. And I think that's the wrong approach, in my opinion. I think even if we were to go with the Democrats as a people, they still can't do us any good with that agenda if they don't get into office. And it's bigger than just the two candidates, in my opinion. It's the judges down the line. It's his incompetent cabinet
Right.
members of, the education secretary. She got to go.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody needs to wake up Ben Carson and walk him home. You know?
That's real. we just saw him a couple of weeks ago at the convention, and somebody had to put a mirror under his nose.
Yeah, and he's the head of housing. Go home. Just go to your
Yeah,
house.
yeah, yeah. Damon, it bears, and especially in terms of what's going on in the cities of like Portland,
Mhm.
and talking about, and when you talk about fascist behavior, give people an idea, if you can, of how you see this administration demonstrating fascism and what has resulted on our streets.
Yeah, I'm sure like in the last few months, a few years, people have started to like Google this word. It kind of like went away from our like collective understanding of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And our current times make them very prevalent. And I say that to say that in a lot of ways, the infrastructure of fascism is
Mm-hmm.
interwoven into American society.
Mm.
So I think one of the dangers about how we look at the Trump administration is that we use his horrible, ridiculous personality to like single him out and not look at how he is a symptom of a larger problem instead of the
Mm.
cause of the problem, as we like to like make it seem. So fascism, one is a 20th century movement that is about domination and control. Is usually intertwined with like control of military power. So that's
Mm-hmm.
why I think you see right now, what you mentioned, the use of like federal troops to respond to protesters. But I think even on a local level, what we have to recognize and really speak towards is like Trump's base is this Blue
Yeah.
Lives Matter,
Yeah.
very racist police state, and that for the
Mm-hmm.
last few generations, fascism has been rooted in a lot of our police departments. So when you see things like Klan rallies, or you see things like swastikas, or some of the other symbolic language, or some of these like Twitter trolls, or you see people
Mm-hmm.
excited or happy once people are getting shot in the streets at protests and naming the shooters as heroes,
Yeah.
that is speaking to like a deeper way in which America sees dominance as a form of power, and as a value system. And so within fascism, usually it is about scapegoating minorities. So as you see it
Right.
with like indigenous folks, or what we call, Latinx or Spanish speaking communities, obviously what's happening to Black people, the rise of homophobia and transphobia as a way to name that there is an outsider that's a problem. There's usually like a
Right.
foreign threat. So now there's all this conversation about China and about the other side, about the outsider
Mm-hmm.
coming to take our jobs. And it's all about this competition and this dominance. And it empowers a majority based off a very hyperactive minority, that then, so like, these white Trumpers that then directly oppress and beat down minority people who are vulnerable. And then usually the last thing is like control of factions of government. So the thing that I think is really concerning is like using the post office
Right.
as like political, game and capital. So the reason why I gave that large history, say that Trump, from a like ideological level is like putting
Mm-hmm.
gas in the car of fascism.
Yeah.
But the reason why I say I'm disappointed with all of the candidates or the entire structure is I think that both parties have been building the vehicle,
Yeah.
and so you know
They both play a part in
yeah,
that.
the
Yeah.
agents that Trump sent to Portland were funded and created by the Democratic Party. The deportations that we're seeing that Trump do at these brutal levels, or the internment camps of children on the border, that is something, unfortunately, that the Obama administration invested in as well. They just
Mm-hmm.
don't say the bad thing, right? Or they
You're
don't
right. Yeah.
hype up that ground racist fervor in the same way, which then explodes into this like type of fascist warfare that we're seeing. So in terms of like the historical preferences or references,
Right.
we look at like Italy and Germany,
Mm-hmm.
and usually it like just happened right in the face of folks, kind of just like allowing oppression or bigotry to like
Sure.
become
To rise
become
up.
the yeah.
To rise up. Um, Damon, if this world were yours, who would you like, or do you even see the use of a two-party political system? If this world were yours, who or what type of system would you like to see as a part of our, for lack of a better word, democracy?
Yeah, yeah. So that's the first thing, is I would like to see a participatory system. So I
Mm-hmm.
think one of the problems with how we view electoral arena of politics is that it's actually depoliticizing. So the
Mm-hmm.
idea of I'm going to pick one person to then make all of the choices, as opposed to I'm going to have a person that I select to administrate and be accountable to me, and then I'm participating in the choices between the 4 years, is the first thing. So one, participatory democracy is, I think, a language that we need. And right now we have representative democracy, where
Right.
an elite say, we will do it for you. So right now, 535 people make the decision for 3 or 400 million people.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I would say is that we need a multi-party system,
Mm-hmm.
to like make it basic. So I think this binary and of this competition that's really performative is really problematic. And then we would have like a ranked choice where you can say, hey, I want this person first, and then I want this person second, and then maybe this person third or fourth. And then within that, we build government based off coalition. And so I would also like to see state power or political economy built up from the communal level,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to from like hierarchical bureaucracy. So I feel
Mm-hmm.
like kind of like the level of like the block club should be
Yeah.
where government is happening, should be where decisions are being made, and then we go up each level in terms of resources and power. So yeah, so first, I do think that both parties are harmful if we want to be practical. What's happening in the Green Party or the Working Families Party,
Mm-hmm.
or even within like the Democratic Socialist wing, I think is a step in the right direction. I do think, though, however, we have to have like a larger conversation about the Constitution itself, and then particularly about the Electoral College when we're talking about the federal executive branch. That is a slave-based system. It is not created for democracy. It's created for white Southern landowners to have
Right.
more power, and they use that power for warfare and incarceration and corporate exploitation, and it's destroying the planet and like making people really sick. And so I think this whole notion of I don't have a direct vote, whereas we can see the last two Republican presidents did not win the popular vote to enter office initially, right? And the
Right.
fact that the Democratic Party doesn't say that more speaks to a little level of complicity
Mm-hmm.
that frustrates me. I think
Yeah.
what the thing that at the end of the day, and I'll stop here, is that the way that media filters the conversation, it makes it look
Mm-hmm.
like these are the two poles of politics,
Mm-hmm.
when actually they agree much more
Then
on the
they do.
basics of war, of our healthcare system,
Mm-hmm.
of corporate power, of the power of workers and labor. And they do these performances that I think are to keep folks distracted and keep folks entertained in a way that don't have us in strikes the way we were in the 20s and 30s and this holiday that we're celebrating.
Do you see any organizations such as you're talking about with the block clubs being that first level of government for us on a local level? Do you see any communities in our country that do exemplify that have tried it and are succeeding on some level?
Yeah, usually it happens in like small experiments, for like a few weeks or a few months. You see like liberated zones. There's something happening in
Mm-hmm.
Seattle right now. We did something here in Chicago called Freedom Square in 2016, in the
Right.
West Side, where we like held the space 24/7 for a few months. What I've been seeing that I think is like the example is mutual aid. And so particularly in the pandemic where there's been a shortage of goods and supplies,
Mm-hmm.
folks redistributing food and groceries and passing those out for free. And those being the beginning of like local decision making, making sure folks have COVID testing and basic needs are being met. And within that, you'll start to see like the beginnings of it. But the truth is like the model that I want to see, one often doesn't have the resources or
Mm-hmm.
is facing heavy opposition
Right.
from those in power. So it's usually not sustainable with what's available right now, but I've seen a lot of the seeds being planted.
Do
Can I,
you?
can I
Sure.
jump in?
Of course.
Are there any examples of a democracy or a government structure that closely model what you would like to see the United States be that you're aware of around the world?
Yeah, throughout the third world. I mean, there's a lot of like pre-colonial examples. So I think that's something we need to just like always register is that like human beings have been living for 250,000 years. There were tens and tens of thousands of years of civilization throughout Africa, throughout the Middle East, throughout South and Central America before these last 400 to 500 years that we think is like all of history. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
throughout the South, in Colombia, throughout, I think in Angola and some places in the Congo, you'll see these local council type basic like participatory democracies that usually have some type of like intergenerational decision making councils, and they're happening on a small level. They're usually happening with less resources, so it's not like high technology. But oftentimes you'll see that there's like longer life expectancies, and then also like there is no militarism. So one place,
Mm-hmm.
if for example in Colombia is Palenque. It is the first place in the Western Hemisphere where slaves liberated themselves,
Mm-hmm.
because slavery started in South America first. Um, and they still speak African languages from the Congo and from other parts of Western Africa. And they are usually an arts-based community that goes out and travels and performs and then brings back resources and sustains decision making. So on like a global scale, they will be considered living in poverty, but like on a cultural and almost like spiritual level, that they are living in what I would consider like a wealth that is kind of beyond, I think what we're doing.
Do you think you'll see something like this in your lifetime?
um,
Because
you know,
I'm old. I'm going to tell you,
yeah.
I don't see this happening in the next 40 years. But
N-
but in
n-
your
n-
lifetime.
no, I don't see my vision happening in my lifetime. I do think that we can build healthy models and alternatives. I do think we can start to use current infrastructure like land trust models,
Mm-hmm.
and cooperatives, and doing more like urban communal farming and sustainable regenerative food sources. I think you can do small pieces, so it's happening
Sure.
here. There's like an organization in Chicago called the Sweetwater Foundation,
Mm-hmm.
and they do this regenerative like hydroponic from the farm to the fish to the there are models happening. I don't see the end of like the American empire as I would
Right.
like happening in my
Yeah.
lifetime.
Right.
But I do see possibilities, particularly with the new advantages of technology for the next generation to get us closer. But to like try to stay focused, you got to play the long game.
Yeah, yeah. I have a hard enough time getting through Zoom calls, Damon. I don't know how these conversations and these
Yeah.
levels of leadership and everything would work, but I'm fascinated by the idea, and so in terms of people getting more information from you about what you're doing, while we're at this point, how can people reach you?
Well, I'm at Damon underscore AF April Fools,
Uh-huh.
on
April Fool's,
Instagram
sure.
and Twitter.
Uh-huh.
That's the truth. And then also you can follow the organization, the Let Us Breathe Collective at Let Us Breathe 773 on Instagram and Twitter. And then you can also follow the Black Abolitionist Network, which is doing a lot of great work here locally in Chicago this summer.
So let's talk about what you've been doing this summer because everybody from mainstream media is telling about the violence and how the business life of downtown Chicago has been destroyed forevermore,
Mm-hmm.
and without concentrating once again on what the purpose of protesting and was about, and
Mm-hmm.
allowing other things to just kind of erase the good and the purpose of what folks are doing.
Yeah. So and I also want to speak to what happened downtown, but I'll get to what like we've been doing on the ground.
Yeah.
So so far this summer, we've trained through a political education series over like 13 to 1,500 people about how state violence has affected Black people and how the history of building movement and political action or direct action helps create social and societal change. And so that work has been happening under the hashtag defund CPD. The Chicago Police Department is the largest police department per capita of any major city in the United States. It has had one of the worst histories in terms of homicides and abuse. As well as misconduct settlements. Also has, I'm now formally working with the Chicago Torture Justice Center, which works
Nice.
with survivors of John Burge torture, a police commander who for 20 years ran a ring of organized torture for false confessions and for information. And so in Chicago, there was an ordinance that gave reparations to those survivors and to their family members. One, also, it should be named that the current administration is not following through with all the commitments on that reparation package. So that's one thing that should be pushed. There are also survivors of torture who are still incarcerated 20, 30 years for crimes they did not commit. But within that is just a piece of some of the work under this larger push for divestment from carceral militarism or from systems of punishment and mass incarceration, whether that be prisons, jails, police, or all forms of surveillance. Because the claim is that police do not keep us safe. If anything, Chicago and the South and West Side is a prime example of how policing and over-policing actually does not work, and I would argue, perpetuates violence and instability.
Sure.
And so trying to push folks to understand that we can redistribute those resources to services that build healthy communities. And so within that, you've seen a lot of mutual aid efforts, you've seen trainings, you've seen protests. We got the removal of the Douglas Park. That's another thing. We got the removal of the Columbus statue. As you see, Frederick Douglass is behind me. Stephen Douglas Park has been renamed to Anna and Frederick Douglass Park on the west side of Chicago. So a lot of action has been built towards building larger movement structures for longer transformational change under this notion that this is a historical legacy of oppression of Black people. And the way to keep safe Black communities is to abolish violent systems of racist oppression and create new solutions. And that's really what we're trying to open up the conversation for. It's not about getting rid of just bad things. It is about we need to, in these new times, update our society. And we need a presence of new services and new resources that actually are preventative and are healthy in their responses.
And how do you do all this in the age of a pandemic?
A lot of it has been virtual. Also figuring out how to experiment with outdoor social distancing events. And so, the thing about the South and West Side of Chicago is that it's underdeveloped. And so there's a lot of actual open space that is not being used. So in the midst of housing crisis and medical crisis, you'll just see acres of unused land. And so revitalizing that land, claiming that land, loving that land, and using that as a space to then educate people where folks' chairs are 6 feet apart and we have microphones and we have amplifiers, and then passing out PPE equipment, offering COVID testing to neighbors and community members, and then also using these tools. We're in a virtual space as well. So I'm having a lot of online trainings and online mass meetings for folks. And then just kind of a lot of the day-to-day keeping up on calls and staying together. So a lot of it has been virtual, but after the uprising, after the death of George Floyd, we are in a time of rebellion. And uprising of historic proportion. So even to what the conversation has been in Chicago about these businesses downtown destroyed, the way that is framed is never talked about in the fact that in America, but particularly in Chicago, the levels of racially concentrated poverty, the levels of inequity and inequality are at an all-time high. So the Mag Mile, as one of the wealthiest places of retail and tourism, next to these places of deprivation, of organized abandonment, within a pandemic, and then you come into Inglewood and shoot, someone, and then antagonize people in the community after you shoot someone. When things like this happen all over the world, people rise up. They used to
Right.
call them peasant uprisings,
Mm-hmm.
and we think about it historically, like with some type of valor or
Sure.
beauty or power. But when
Yeah.
it's young Black people, it's viewed as demonic or problematic or violent.
Mm.
And so, they don't talk about the fact that, armed militias come and shoot people in the back, and young Black people understand that there's a connection between capital and someone getting shot in my neighborhood. So I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
go take something in a time where I'm not getting what I need. And so it might not be within like the moral code of liberal society, but actually no one was harmed. And it is what happens when oppression builds up. And
Right.
inequality builds up. And so if we don't want these things to happen, why don't we ask the question of why organically, because these are not organized events, right? Like no one
Mm-hmm.
passed out a flyer and said, hey, this Friday we're going downtown, right? Like imagine
Right.
the life of, oh, something just happened and now I'm in this mode of action. That means you are already experiencing
Yeah.
a level of disruption. And why no one with a human empathy asks, what do those people need? What is the housing conditions of those thousands of young people in the street? What are the employment conditions? What is the health conditions during a pandemic where both of our political parties are promising that we're not going to give health care to people while people are dying at rapid rates? We don't ask what are the conditions of the people. So yeah, I'll stop like rambling or getting on my speech there.
No.
But yeah, it's been quite a summer to say the least. Simple.
It,
What you say,
Bill,
Pops?
he had a quote in the conversation that he and I were discussing this topic
Mm-hmm.
about the looting and the rioting, and he said that's because people are can't be concerned about the cotton burning on the plantation in the midst of the uprising.
Yeah.
So
wow.
Worrying about the stores
Yeah.
downtown, worrying about Gucci
Mm-hmm.
or Nordstrom's downtown in 2020 is like worrying about the cotton burning on a plantation during a slave uprising in
Mm.
1820. And so
Mm.
my question is like, when people see these stories, and that's why I always say don't trust your news sources, particularly corporate news, because whose side are you really on?
Yeah.
And if we looked at this with some historical perspective, you would know, which side of the fence you land
Mm-hmm.
and where the real violence is. And the violence is people not having what they need when it is available. That's
Yeah.
my thing, is
Yeah.
that our
Yeah.
society produces and is capable of making sure everyone has a place to sleep, everyone has medicine, and everyone has enough food. And people every day make choices to not do that. That is the violence that people are responding to.
Wow. Has there been an opportunity, or has there been an occasion, I should say, in which someone, either from an administration, I'm not saying who's, or some business leader has come forward? Because I listen to a lot of talk radio, black,
Mhm.
white, and in between, but there's always these people who say, what can I do? Who do I talk to? Has there been someone in this long, hot summer of 2020, or even before that, come to you and said, let's work together? I see where you are headed. I see your plan. I see your vision, and let us make a change.
No.
Simple answer. Simple
No, not
answer.
really. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
there are people who have proximity to privilege and power that are interested. But if you're asking like, and then there is a political absurgency. So there are
Mm-hmm.
new older people in city council that are doing good work and are uplifting this fight. But like, for example, like folks from the mayor's administration in any type
Mm-hmm.
of good faith, no, they gaslight our movement. They try to make
Mm-hmm.
us seem insignificant or act like as if we don't exist.
Mm-hmm.
And the political power of our city and of our state, I would say, is in opposition
Yeah.
to what we stand for. And it's less about glass breaking downtown, and it's
Mm-hmm.
more about the commitment to
Right.
capitalism.
Right.
It is,
And you can't mess with their money. You just
yeah.
can't.
So
You just
what was your affiliation with Apple? That project you did.
That was with my podcast. Just a live series in the Apple Store down on Michigan Avenue. As I got these AirPods.
And so, were you able to engender any kind of relationship through that, or that was just a period of time in which you broadcast from
Those were
there?
good people like locally who work in the store who do programming. So it's almost like the folks who booked the concert. So, as
Mm-hmm.
talent was brought in and certainly had great conversations. So that's the weird thing. There's never a time when anybody in real life ever disagrees with the things
Right.
that we
Right.
say. So in
Yeah.
spaces, whenever, culturally or politically have been invited, it's been well received. Folks feel transformed and is welcomed. But in true positions of authority or institutional power, no, I've not seen any like good faith efforts, because you don't need to talk to me to do the right thing. You don't need to talk to me to fund schools. You don't need to talk to me to keep hospitals open. If you want to be on the right side, like, I have to do this because you are not doing the right thing. If there were, I think what is needed, I wouldn't need to do the job. I can just like go somewhere and try to be cute.
and live the good life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, you were talking about coronavirus testing. Are you all still finding in Chicago about the escalation of cases, or is it seemingly at a steady level now?
I've been keeping up as much, Dad. What you been saying?
I have. We're hovering right around a 4% positivity rate. The death cases are not as many, but there's still, between 800 to 1,000 people with positive cases on a daily basis. But Illinois and it's broken down. We've broken down to counties into zones. So like Will County, for instance, they have different restrictions from the rest of the county because they had a spike in that area. So our governor, I think, is kind of being proactive with really getting a good job and handle on it. And so that's why we're able to do Riddle's Comedy Club, because we haven't been pushed back to phase 2 or 3.
Right. And good for you. And I wanted to talk about that because, Damon, you have been right there in the forefront of opening up and doing the right thing, that a lot of people are still kind of trepidatious about that, and wondering, is this the time, or but I got to get out there, and the people need to laugh, and how best to do that. How are you faring with all that?
Well, we in particular, we have 200 seats, but we only allow 50 people. That's our max. So, if people come in, they sit with the people that they brought. We do temp checks. We don't sit parties with other people. Most of the time, some people keep their masks on, some don't. Sometimes it's funny because you might see a couple, that came in and they rode together. They did a little something last night. Some riddles and sit with just them with their mask on. I'm like, y'all think we got it? Stop each other for the whole last 24 hours. Then you gonna come in here and mask up. So that's understandable, but the distance is there, so we having fun with it, and then it's just good for them, because especially like couples and even single people who have been, kind of cooped up and don't, to have that communal experience with laughter involved. I always tell people to laugh to their chest, don't laugh up. I don't like just in case, laugh at yourself.
You're so silly, but you're right. So you do that. You're about 25% capacity at Riddles, and people are responding.
Yeah, well, we get 50 people allowed, but it depends on who we have. Like when D-Ray came and did a pop-up,
Right.
we had about 63 people. I ain't gonna lie. We did about 63 on that one, countless. But typically, that's the good part about it. For the people that don't have still concerns about it, we're not even doing 50. We might have 30 on some shows, 25. But it's just enough for us to have an audience and for those people to have that experience and get back out. So, like I said, I'm dipping my toe into the situation, but I'm not rushing full speed because I still get a couple hours unemployment. But but since that 600 fell off, we had to get back out.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? We was crab legging and lobster tailing. Now we didn't get reacquainted with chicken. So and dark meat. Those
got wingdings over there.
It's really been good for the people. I believe you can tell, like the comments and the social media afterwards. Like I just needed that laugh, and I needed to be out and needed to experience that. So what I do want to do is start live streaming, because when the weather breaks here in Chicago, that's another thing.
Right.
land that they've been using for these training sessions and meetings are going to end in Chicago at about October 30th. Y'all going to be back to virtual.
Okay.
So all of the, the rooftops and the outdoor dining situation going to go away. So we'll be primary options for people that want to come inside and do that. So I think it'll grow a little bit at that point. And hopefully the numbers will decrease and we'll see a change. It's a hoax until November 4th, according to Trump anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Damon, I was asking your dad about his work in comedy, but with all that you do and all that you take on, all of the responsibilities you have, how do you take care of your soul? How do you replenish yourself?
I mean, that's a really good question. It's been a struggle and like a learned lesson to stay dedicated to those processes. Certainly as building my crafts and my thinking. So, reading and writing is really important. And then trying to also maintain the body. So trying to like get my smoothies and my supplements going. And, I'm lucky to have a really great life partner and who's also in this work with me. So, getting to have somebody to hold you up and be able to, blow steam off with. Picked up a pretty consistent weed habit.
Like father, like son. Okay, all right.
I probably got it beat.
So I was a seller. No.
Right, and on a bicycle, no less.
But I've been subsidizing the movement, supporting the movement.
but it's hard, but I think one of the things that in the last few years has become more clear, and as I study what's been most impactful historically, is recognizing like people working for their liberation or people working for a collective good is really a spiritual legacy and tradition. And so one thing, at our best, what we attempt is for the work itself to be regenerative. And so it's not always rah, megaphone, proverbial Molotov cocktails because be watching. It's also about peace circles. It's about planning together. It's about meals. It's about gardening. It's about art. So really trying to make sure that creativity and healing is central to the organizing. It is part of the best answer when we're functioning at our optimal. But then also what I've been learning is how to give myself a break. And I think that's something that just all people need to hear, no matter what field. I think this world can be really gloomy. I think the way information is organized right now is detrimental to like our psychology. And we can put a lot of like pressure and burden on ourselves, or it's easy to be stuck in like melancholy. But recognizing just like on a day-to-day that like, if certain basic needs are met, life is really beautiful. And so trying to lean and ground into that and knowing that we all don't have to be everything, and that also includes myself. And so knowing that like sometimes having these conversations is more my work than being, on some bullhorn or marching down the street all the time. And so trying to pick my battles and take it easier is part of the answer.
And take it easy on yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it wouldn't hurt if your dad didn't have a took-a-loose boat that he could take you out on every once in a while, huh?
Yeah, we ain't been splashing this summer, man. It's the recreation.
I checked on Brother T today just to see what was happening. Are you gonna be just fine? You be ready? Today. He already promised me 4th of July and Labor Day weekend.
Of 2021?
Infinity and beyond, trust me.
But you know what? I gotta say, following your dad, it's just great sometimes to see you guys with your grandmother or kicking back with the family and in your dad's backyard and things like that. Those are really special moments, and it was good to see you smile and you guys hang out together. So and that really does fill your spirit and with good times like that. But this, ladies and gentlemen, I wish I had the real magazine, but his dad has all the copies that I don't have. This. What page is it, Damon?
I don't know the physical page.
Wait, there's more. Oh, hold on now. What?
Damon, your son is featured in this magazine, The Great Fire. Guest editor is Ta-Nehisi Coates, and this is just with Brianna on the cover. First of all, how did this happen?
Yeah. So first, want to say again, rest in peace to Breonna Taylor. And as we mourn the loss of our sacred spirits, recognizing that justice means creating a new world where these things don't happen. And so as we all carry this pain, like know that we all have a responsibility. Also honor Angela Davis, who I think is on an alternative cover.
Yes.
Really, the like a matron saint that is ushered in, and she didn't do it alone. She is a human being and is a part of a collective. But it's so important to our world and does not get the shine as a living icon. So how I was able to be in it is me and Ta-Nehisi Coates have a mutual friend, the writer Eve Ewing, who's an amazing scholar and creator and writer. And so they have a real good relationship. And so also he has a relationship with a mentor of mine, Dr. Barbara Ransby, also amazing activist, educator, scholar. And so I was able to meet him about a year ago at an event about reparations here in Chicago. And then he was trying to get Miriam Cabo, who everybody should know, but she ain't feel like doing it. So they'll look for someone else. So he hit up Eve Ewing, and Eve Ewing, point him in my direction. And we had met before, and he came to a rally that we did a couple years ago for Martin Luther King
Sybil,
Day.
let me tell you, Damon was a basketball fan, and he was, basketball's been a big part of our lives. And he was always excited about athletes, and I've gotten a chance to meet people. But when he met Brother Coates, it was like he met Kobe Bryant again. He was like, man, I was like, I wasn't really deep into the movement or his work. Like, nah, man, you don't understand. I met the man, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. The time I said
yeah, so he definitely has he's provided an example of how to impact people's thinking in ways that I really aspire towards. And so being able to meet him or be in something that he edited was really an honor. And so it was kind of wow, I didn't know the context of it because it's virtual, so everything is all separate. And so I didn't realize that I was going to be on like a list with like Black Thought and the Squad and Mother Teresa and everybody. But it's really been a beautiful honor.
So how did that work in this age of the pandemic? So you said a lot of the work was done and discussion was done virtually, but obviously the photographer had to come and set it up and do all of this and go through the photography,
so
right?
It's wild. So I'm just a little humble little activist, as they call me. I don't really use the word, but wearing my same little dirty shoes and beat up t-shirts every day. And they sent me this box of clothes.
Right.
And it was like $15,000 to $20,000 worth of clothes. And they gave me no instructions either. They just said, "Here's a box of clothes." I'm like, "Oh, actually, they came up. We should have." So it's all types of fitty stuff in there. It was really like kind of intimidating and kind of scary because it's like it's supposed to be for the people and don't want to like be in the kingly robes of Prince Hakim's airport trip. Trying to talk about making sure that folks have a place to stay.
Right.
But the piece that they ended up having me in, it was a Black designer, Fear of God. And so what they did, my partner Jennifer took a picture of me in the house and then sent it to them. So that was the selection process of the things that they sent. And then we went to a park right near our community space, the breathing room, here on the South Side. And luckily Chicago has really beautiful park districts. And we found a tree and we, took some pictures and he was over there like 6 to 7 feet. And then sent it back. And then the journalist emailed me the questions and we corresponded that way. And then, this is the result. So it's been kind of a whirlwind.
So how do you think you were represented in this? Because I think it came off beautifully, and I think you're a brilliant spokesperson. I think that you have the gift of words, unlike a lot of people. And I'm just wondering your immediate response to that. I mean, your dad, your mom are very
Yeah,
excited and proud of you,
yeah.
obviously. But when you open that and you look at it for the first time, what goes through your mind?
The first thing that goes to my mind is the history.
Mm,
One, the history of mass communication and public, one that this thing exists, and seeing all of the work and all of the editors and all the writers, and in being asked to do it, I did have a perspective of what the whole piece was. I just knew
right.
Ta-Nehisi Coates and Angela
Yeah.
Davis and Eve Ewing was around it, so it had to be something good. So seeing one again, like who I was in context in, was kind of earth shattering, because the notion of like celebrity activists is actually a really fraught thing, and it's something I
Yeah.
really strive to avoid.
Sure.
But with that, like fear and anxiety aside, one on a personal level, I was very happy for my family and my parents, and then like future descendants and generations. This feels
Mm,
like a moment or an image that will probably be one of the ones when I'm gone that folks will look back on, because I'm always thinking about history in the future. And then as I wear so many hats, I don't know which one is actually mine. I'm stepping into realizing that all of this work is around popular education. And so that was my attempt in trying to answer the questions: is how do I be honest and portray an example of humanity that I want to see,
mhm.
and be vulnerable. But how do I use this not to just promote, or self celebrate, but to try to introduce some new ideas, or continue a legacy of this liberatory radical tradition of love,
Yeah.
that I see myself in. And so I felt that what I attempted to articulate came out well. The only thing that I wish is that I could have brought more people with me.
Mhm.
And that's the only thing that like I am
They were
feeling is
with
that.
you. They were
Yeah,
with
yeah,
you.
yeah. And so,
Yeah.
it's an honor to be highlighted. There's some discomfort in being pulled out.
Mhm.
Part of what we're trying to have is like a leader fold movement. And
Mhm.
there's so many people that I look to and admire, that like, I I want this to be a moment for as well. But there's only, one page.
Yeah.
And so living with that and the choice, and then also the value of relationships.
Yeah.
And so feeling really honored, that this was not something I asked for, but based off the relationships that I've had and worked to build, being able to be able to receive this and, hopefully, honor the people that I'm accountable to.
Yeah. You
And
have.
I just
And
want to that.
no, I was going to ask you
Yeah.
your response to seeing him in this magazine.
Well, it's not even just him, because to be honest, this young man has done a lot of things in his life, movies and commercials and things of that
Mhm.
nature. So he made me proud. Basketball, and he got academic scholarship in school, and turned his third eye on and became person. But this issue, I celebrate the entire issue for what it
Yeah.
stands for. It's beautiful examples of blackness throughout, and all type of there are celebrities and people you had have heard of or may not have heard of, but this should be in everybody's household, like an
Yeah.
athlete magazine on the coffee.
I thought
This is a
about
key.
that too.
That's why I
Yeah.
got so buying a bunch of them. So y'all better get out and get yours. But I want all my family members to have this in their household so they can
Mhm.
visit this 5, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, and look back on it, because it's a ode to all the people out there, or a lot of
Mhm.
people that are doing the work. And so that's what I'm most proud that he's included. Of course, I'm happy that he's been acknowledged for his work, because even in this article, he said some things that are
Yes.
transpiring this moment of movement. He didn't even think that people would come around, because he's been talking this to me, and as a father, I'm supportive, but I still didn't have a grasp of abolish the police and defund the police department.
Mhm.
And now to see the whole world with signs of things that he's been talking about way before this came out as a popular thing, it was gratifying for me, for him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because he has such
Yeah.
inspiration, and he's such a heavy dude that when we're having basic kick it time, uh, I'll ask him a question and it'll go from that to, man, I'm like, there you go with that damn pill again. I'm trying to get
Yeah,
I,
I've become
I,
quite the
I,
downer.
and it's not even a
So
downer. It's just like I always want to see where and where does he find joy? Where do you
Yeah.
find joy? Because if you try to break down all of the things that he's absorbing and he's aware
Mm-hmm.
of, because some of the stuff I'm dealing with the bliss of the ignorance of, like, I had no idea. I'm like, damn, now I can't be happy about this. You know what? Thank you for enlightening me, but damn it,
But
it was amazing. Yeah.
I'm gonna have to hit some of this ingredient here. Um,
Yeah.
you know what? I can't wait. See, what happens in my mailbox is that I know that they'll eventually come. There are some issues of essence that are a little late in arriving because I think they're sitting at the post office and people are just, kind of taking it in. And I'm sure that's what has happened with this particular issue of my Vanity Fair. So I know that it's going to come, but I am also going to go out and buy all the copies that I possibly can to support you and all of the wonderful people who are saluted. I think that they're doing great things. Even when you think about the previous issue where Viola Davis was photographed by a black photographer, had a cover photo on Vanity Fair for the very first time.
And
That's
that says a lot. I mean, it's an amazing accomplishment, but it's also it's a statement about society that we're still having first black
yeah,
this.
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Simple stuff like come on now, the first black photographer 2020. So we got a lot of work to do, but we can celebrate as we go along for people. But I'm so sick, man. We had the first astronaut. We still having our first.
Yeah.
That's frustrating. See, that's that pill right there.
but there's somebody, I think it was somebody on Kevin Hart's XM radio station, and there's a guy, one of the Plastic Cup Boys, and he's like, I hate hearing about the first this and the first black this and first black that and this, but I am of the mind that I still think we need to celebrate and to acknowledge and even though it's like, damn, we're in 2020 and it's the first time this is happening, let's just celebrate. And because there's so much that brings us down, let us lift up and let us lift up young men like you, Damon Williams. You are truly, truly a special, special man and a human being. And so we want to continue to have you on and to talk about these things and also to see how your daddy's doing in the comedy biz as he ventures out into coronavirus land. I really appreciate you guys and taking the time today to come and talk. And as we hear all of the great things that you're doing and want to definitely continue to lift you up and encourage you, and also to put a little money in your daddy's pockets amongst the 50 people that can come
Please
in
do.
to
Please
Riddles.
do.
Damon, where were
Hey,
you this weekend?
I'll be home. I'll be home at Riddles. I'm really not going anywhere anytime soon.
Okay.
That
You
I
were
can
just in
help.
Ohio, right?
Yeah, I was in Cleveland with Sam Silk. I do his radio
Oh
show
yeah. Oh
Tuesdays and
Sam.
Thursdays. Damon, what you think segment. So
Mm-hmm.
that's WZAK.com, WZAKCleveland.com. So you can hear like what we used to do on the Join the Show. I also want to acknowledge another first. I have the first black mailman that brings mail before 10 a.m. I want to give that brother his kudos. Come at dinner and ask for a plate. Remember?
Yeah. Yeah, I mailman was bogus.
Shouts out to another first.
I love that. I love you guys. I thank you so much for coming on. David, tell your mom I said hello. David, tell Juanita I send my love as well. And J. Anthony Brown taking the day off because he works so hard. And so he'll be back next Monday. And tomorrow, Kevin Woodson, formerly of the Tom Jordan Morning Show and the man of 1,000 voices, is going to be here with me tomorrow. You guys have a great evening. Damon, find your joy. Find your joy. Okay. All right. And Damon, you keep up the hard work and the good work, keeping us laughing too. We appreciate you guys. Take care, everybody. I love you back. Take care, everybody. Wash your hands. Put your mask on. Be careful. Be safe. We'll see you tomorrow.